when I went all in land flipping, when I knew that it was the thing for me, that completely transformed my world. It just made it like created this opening in the universe, and I was able to step through.
Welcome to the Inflow Podcast. I am your host, Michelle Bosch. I see a gaping hole across society that focuses on the outer work and forgets about the inner work, when what we really need is to bridge the gap between prosperity and spirituality to live a life in flow, with inflows of light, inflows of cash, inflows of creativity, inflows of grace in our lives. Each week, join me for powerful messages and interviews that will leave you inspired and ready to step into flow in your higher work. So now, let's go. Welcome to the Inflow Podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Bosch. Super excited to have a very special guest today on Inflow. Someone that, I have, known through the Land Profit Generator community, but that has, become a really good friend, someone that has been excelling, in our coaching world, and has also stepped up, in her leadership and in her wanting to, really be of service to other women. And I am so privileged and honored to have with you today, Jonna Cohen. And I hope I pronounced the last name correct and the first name as well. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on Inflow and just, sharing your story. As far as I'd like to ask, how, and I usually ask all of my ladies, how did you grow up around money? Because, this land flipping thing involves money, and there's more to it than just the money. But I think at the beginning, as a starting point, a lot of people come into real estate because they're looking to improve their financial, lives in one shape or the other. And now they find, once they're in it, that it can really sculpt, you in your character, in your leadership, in your emotional life, mental, in everything. It really will stretch you in other ways. But I think at the core, when somebody is looking into real estate of some sort, or becoming entrepreneurial in a way, they, money is a consideration. So how did you grow up around money, and what made you decide that you wanted to look at real estate?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, somewhat ironically, my mother was in banking for the first 30 years of my life. And so in theory, I was surrounded by the concepts of money, but it was actually something that wasn't transparent at all. And in fact, there was a lack of money, especially my mom was a single mom, and then I lived with my dad part-time as well. And so with my mom, I always knew there was a lack, and we could feel it. We always ate at home, and we didn't do much outside the house, and the kids really did a lot of the work. And, that creates a certain type of work ethic. But both my mom and my dad were not transparent at all about their finances. And so I didn't grow up with the kind of financial literacy that I feel like really arms people to do well in their lives. And so there was also a concept, which I'd mentioned before in an interview with Jack, that my parents were hippies. And so money was something that was bad. And it was something that wasn't to be cultivated or to be encouraged. You had what you needed and you shared the rest. And I think that really went to my core of who I am and my values and the way that I interact in the world. So I've spent a lot of time doing nonprofit work and human rights work, both in the US and abroad. And so I think what's been really transformative for me was not only to see that money can be a tool that can create success within your own life, but that it's something that you can share with others and create even greater change through. And so I think for me, it's just been completely transformative being in this real estate world, in this land flipping world, and feeling like money is almost this abstract concept. It's something that is really expansive and that there's no limit to it. And so for the first time in my life, I've cleared my debt. I made more money than I ever have in my life in the first 6 months of coaching. And it's just like, it's so exciting to see what's possible.
Now, did you have any prior real estate experience?
None.
Okay, so tell us about what world did you come from?
So I've been working in education for the last 20 years. So I've been a yoga teacher, an English teacher. I've worked at the university level at MBAs and EMBA, executive MBAs. Most recently, I was working at the World Food Systems Center. So looking at, the global food chains and how food is distributed in the world. And last year I was in 5th grade problem solving, critical thinking and problem solving.
That is amazing. So, and then how did you pivot from there? Like, what makes you want to pivot and start looking into real estate?
Well, so I lived in Switzerland for the last 10 years, and every job is paid well there. And after 10 years in Switzerland, I wanted my kiddo to be able to speak English and to know my culture. And so we moved back to the US, and I could not find a job here that would support my family. So I went into teaching as kind of a default, but I was, just grinding out these 16-hour days. I was never seeing my kiddo or my husband, and we were just sinking deeper and deeper into debt. And so I knew that that wasn't a long-term solution for me. And so my father came to town October 2019, and he said, look, there's this guy named Jack. I want you to meet him. And so he pulled me along to that first live event, and it was just completely life-changing. I did it on the side for a while I was teaching. And then last May, I went full-time into land flipping.
Woohoo! Now, how many deals have you done since you started?
So last year I closed 30 deals in the first 6 months and made close to $150,000. And then this year already I'll have made $60,000 by the end of today with 5 closes.
That is fantastic. That is incredible. Now, we were just discussing before we hit record of how you were last year, in your very first year of land flipping. It was you doing everything and the mindset of you doing everything, and how basically, like you just expressed right now, you were looking for people to hire you, and now you have, in a very relatively, short period of time, been able to do a quantum leap where now you're bringing on board your first VA and you're hiring someone. And basically what changed up here, in order for you to make that pivot? Like, of course, number one, you're creating the profits, the actual cash that is going to support bringing in help. So that's number one. But what else has happened?
Well, it all kind of started with Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week, where he was there's a race to the bottom, right? So many people are applying for really low-end jobs. There's so much competition at the bottom, but there's so much space at the top. And that was just the beginning of a mindset shift for me, that I applied for over 100 jobs and didn't get most of them. And it was really affecting my self-esteem, because I know I have a really vast skill set, but somehow I wasn't speaking to the employer, and it was this whole process. So when land flipping came along, it was just like I could coalesce and bring together all of those skills. And it's really lovely, and it's really important to me to empower women. And so I've recently hired a female VA, and she also has a child. And it's just so wonderful to be able to create like this family of your own, rather than trying to join someone else's family,
Exactly. Yes. And that is like leadership right there. You know what I mean? In terms of like, there's nothing wrong with being part of something bigger, in a bigger group, in a bigger organization. But there is something to be said for now, knowing that, or at least for me, as a business owner, that I'm now not making just decisions that are fiscally prudent, for my business specifically, but that I have now someone else in mind and someone else's family that in some way, shape, or form I'm helping support as well. And that basically my decisions will impact many others, you know what I mean? And as a result of that, I want to make sure that I'm fiscally prudent, that, that I don't go and like I was telling Jack, like, there's no way I would ever go bungee jumping, because I know that, we have a team of 40 that depends on us. And what if that rope, tears, you start making a little bit, I think more holistic decisions, and I don't want to say careful, but where you're thinking about others. And I think us as women, the moment that we pivot into more of that leadership, we already have it innate in us, in that nurturing and that taking care of our family. And when we make that pivot into being a business owner now with hiring people on board, it's such an easy transition for us to also, bring that along, as well, because we're much more for what money can do for others, you know what I mean? And so in bringing that mindset, but at the beginning, it's hard if your business is not cranking out enough cash to even conceive of bringing a VA. At some point, that kind of like value system starts shifting from valuing much more money and valuing much more your time, so that you can bring someone else that has that unique ability and whose genius is to do something that, perhaps you're not so good at. And start moving from just being, somewhat competent at doing certain tasks to only living and doing the things that you're excel, that have a superior, ability in, and somebody else that is competent or, much more competent than you are in that other task can take over. So I totally agree there. Now, as far as mindset, so there's the tactical, know-how of flipping a piece of land. But as far as mindset, what do you think are one of the biggest things, specific things that either held you back or hold generally women back, in terms of going out there, trying something new, number one, being in the trenches, like, okay, now I'm doing this, and all the challenges that come with perhaps going through that first deal or their first 3, 4, 5 deals, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
What are some of those things that perhaps, you struggled with? Because it's not just all flowers and money in the bank. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it.
Absolutely. That's a great question. So I think there's several parts to this. One of it is just feeling deserving of the wealth that comes your way, right? So being able to receive is something that I've really been working on. And I think as women, we don't feel deserving of the things that come our way. So that's some internal work I've been doing. It's also putting on your big girl pants and being brave. And I think my confidence has grown so much through this program, because there are difficult sellers and there are difficult buyers, and forget about title companies. You really have to be in there, day in and day out, like you said, in the trenches and just working through all these issues. And I feel that now I'm really standing my ground, and I say, look, this is what I have to offer. And I know that there will be an abundance of sellers and buyers at the end of the day. If their values don't match mine, I just move on, because I know that there's such an abundance in the universe and that it's meant for me. And so I think that that's been a huge shift. Also, I've been thinking a lot about how I used to think I needed to be of direct service. And if I wasn't working in a nonprofit, that I wasn't making a change in the world. And the properties that I just closed on last Friday that have been in a pain in my butt for 2 months, if we're being honest, it's just a half an acre in the middle of a major metropolitan area, but it's going to become 40 affordable housing units. And that's something that's really dear to my heart. And so indirectly, I contributed to that, because they couldn't have created 40, units for someone to live in at a very affordable price if I hadn't offered the land at a discount. And so I feel like there's so many creative ways to collaborate, and that's something that's really expansive as well.
And that is beautiful. When you come to this business and you're able to see that in the day-to-day transaction, you can be transformational. You know what I mean? That it's much more than just the flip. That is, like you just said right now, that I was part of that chain of humans that are now, making an impact, and people will never know my name possibly, but I contributed to that, and I know about it, and it fills my heart. It fulfills me. And that is, I think, in my opinion, sometimes bigger than the actual monetary flip. You know what I mean? The satisfaction that comes with that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, in general, what has been a relationship where in your life that has been that changed basically that has changed your life in some way? Any relationship, it could be with your mom, with dad, or maybe someone you met, or maybe it was a professor in university, someone that that has made an impact in your life. Is there such a relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, my parents and my father comes to mind. He's always really pushed me and believed in me. And, he was the one that introduced me to the idea of land flipping, but also my husband was the one that had the faith in me to do this before I did. He said, of course you're going to succeed. And I didn't know that yet, but he knew that about me. And so I think it's really beautiful to have all these people in your life that can reflect on who you are and see the holistic part of who you are and remind you of that. So, yeah, I'm really grateful for my family.
Yeah, the same here. It's they believe in you because they know you, number one, or number two, they believe in you because they know that others have been able to do it, and it's just basically kind of like fine-tuning the skill set and fine-tuning the ability, like you said, to receive mentally and in your heart, what you're desiring. I think that's probably one of the most satisfying, I think, things for a coach, even, you know what I mean, to know that you can basically, you can believe for that person before that person believes entirely in themselves, because that others before them have done it, perhaps even less skill sets, perhaps with more even difficult hardships or difficulties in their life, and just basically having that faith as collateral for someone else, basically lending out that faith to someone else is incredible. It's priceless. And I love, like you said, that your husband knew that you were going to be successful, and before you even did, so that is amazing. What excites you right now about the future? What's happening in 2021 and in land flipping in your life, and just in general in your growth as a leader?
I love it. Well, kind of speaking to what you were saying before, my coach has also helped me to see that there's abundance everywhere, especially financial abundance, right? So I was doing this coaching call recently, and he was saying, look, the person who owns that building is a millionaire. The person who owns the land underneath it is a millionaire. And then he went to the next building. And so it was just like this complete transformational mindset where this isn't unusual, and this is where I'm headed. And so again, just expanding that vision. So for me, I'm trying to 4 times my income in the year to come. And so I'm really excited to have a strong team to outsource 85 to 90% of the work to, because we are working towards this kind of like international lifestyle where in the next couple of years, we hope to have a house also in Switzerland. So in this year, I'm going to help my husband to retire from his job and do things that he loves, which is, building bikes, building furniture, flipping cars, whatever he wants, but we won't have to depend on his income in order for him to do what he loves. And again, that's part of him feeling comfortable in a country where he wasn't born. So that's really important to me. And to provide housing for my parents, even though they don't know it yet. So maybe they'll listen to this podcast and find out. But just to make sure that I can really support my family in really, substantial ways.
Wow. Now, did you think you would be here already, I don't know, 5 deals into it?
No way. No way, because it's like
you just talked about retiring your husband, mm-hmm. and basically caring for your parents in a way that they probably doesn't even cross their mind. You know what I mean? Hiring now another lady and building a strong team to help you 4x what you've done. I mean, was that even conceivable 5 deals in?
I think it's kind of like what Jack says. To me, it felt like an accident 5 deals in. I was like, oh, I slipped and fell, and all of a sudden 5 deals closed, you know? I didn't know that it was this rinse and repeat process, but now it feels so rote, and there are constantly offers coming in, and there's constantly buyers making offers. And so it's just become a natural flow. So now I have so much trust in the system that I feel the confidence to be able to say these things out loud.
Ah, I love you're like, there's this flow, and we're here on inflow, and inflows of all goodness coming into our lives, so I love it. So we talked about confidence. We talked a little bit about your husband having faith in you, and how are you cultivating faith each and every day? Because I know that one way to cultivate faith, which a lot of people call confidence, is by doing exactly what you just said, rinse and repeat. Rinse and repeat will build muscle.
Right.
We use that language of building muscle and building confidence, but it's really in my mind, the very first sphere of faith, which is, if you cannot have faith in something out there, please, at least let's start with having faith in yourself. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then from there, kind of like that ring goes out into having faith in the goodness of others and bringing in team, and then eventually, that faith goes into the unknown. Another word for unknown is God, you know what I mean? Or whatever you want to call it, or universe. So how are you cultivating outside of the land flipping and the repetition and the muscle, how are you cultivating faith to have flows and inflows of grace in your life?
Love this question. So I'm a former yoga teacher, so this really speaks to me too. And I think the power of daily meditation is really important to me. Visualization of what is to come. And I've kind of adopted this power hour idea where there's, inspirational reading in the morning, physical wellness, and goal setting. So goal setting is super, super important. And so I think all of those come together to help me also to trust my intuition in sellers and buyers, which just kind of eases the whole process, and it makes it feel really good and like it's in flow, right? So just knowing that I attract the right people into my life and continuing to cultivate those important relationships, it just feels so natural now, right? In a way that I've never had that kind of ease in a job before.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now I want to ask you a little bit more right now, because you just said you're a yoga teacher as well. Believe it or not, many people might not know that I'm also 500-hour yoga teacher certified. I kind of stumbled into yoga back in 2011, and when I stumbled into it, I was mainly going in there for the pure physicality of it, and what happened was that I find this incredible philosophy for life that comes with it, you know what I mean? And I felt so good every time I was going to actually do the physical practice, that I'm like, okay, I'm all in. I want to know everything there is to it about it. How can I do that? I figured out the studio was offering, this teacher training program. I'm like, I'm all in. So anyways, just a little side note tangent there. But when you talk about intuition and when you talk about ease, can you perhaps share how do you distinguish when something is, because there's a lot of people that could say, man, this is so hard, or I'm having all of these challenges, that maybe it's the universe telling me that this shouldn't be. Is that intuition, or is that breaking through old samskaras, as you know in yoga,
I love that.
Or old programming, to be able to find ease eventually? Like, how in your experience, even through the land flipping, how have you been able to distinguish between, okay, this is, my intuition is telling me that this is the way to go, or, in kind of like overriding the challenges, versus saying, okay, no, because if I'm getting all these challenges, this must not be, how do you make that distinction?
Absolutely. Well, I think you're right. There's this fine line between perseverance and ease. And I think it really helped me at the beginning to set expectations. You and Jack had said, okay, when you call the county assessor, you're going to have to talk to 5 people minimum before you get the answer you're looking for. Or, you know, until you find the right title company, you might have to try 3 different title companies. That really helped me to know that I didn't need to settle for that person who was really difficult to work with. I needed to keep trying different people. And so you're exactly right. It takes a ton of mental energy, and it's like running this marathon to get those muscles strong, like you had said. But once that's in place, it's so easy. And from the beginning, to be honest, I think intuition was always a big part of it for me. I do have dreams that help me to know what to do. But also it's just a feeling. And if I am in my body, if I embody that feeling, then it really helps me to know what the direction I should take.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I wanted to ask you a little bit about sacred lineage and wealth, and a wealth related question as well. You know, I know that you've gone through an experience where you've looked back into your family tree. And now that we, you know, talked a little bit about some scars or old programming, you know, that might come, whether good or bad. Sometimes it could be good, sometimes it could be bad. Can you tell me about that experience and what basically that taught you?
Yeah, absolutely. That was actually part of my yoga teacher training, was that we would call on our ancestors, especially our female ancestors. And often it was to relieve the trauma that they had experienced. And a lot of it was through movement and through drumming, but you can call on those ancestors for the knowledge that they have and bring it forward. And so I think so much of the narrative of LPG is, what are you doing for the people who come after you? But I think it's really helpful to harness the strength that we have from the people who came before. And so just to kind of see yourself as part of this flow.
Absolutely. That you're basically building upon standing on the shoulders of someone else, and that you know, strength, faith, whatever it is that, you know, they were able to achieve in their life, that you kind of have that genetic programming in you because they're part of you.
Absolutely.
I love that concept. You know, there's I had here on the show actually Dr. Valerie Ryan. She wrote a book called Patriarchy, Stress Disorder, and basically how you know, our mothers and the mothers of our mothers, you know, have been basically in a system, you know, that has been traditionally led by men, and the traumas that may have come, you know, with that. And something very interesting that she mentioned was that, you know, my mother's connection to Sophia already existed before Sophia was ever born. Being the fact that while I was in my mother's womb, you know, as a, you know, a fetus, you know, or as a baby, I already had in me, you know, half of what would constitute Sophia before Sophia was ever in existence. You know what I mean? You know, half of the ingredients, you know, to say, because a baby girl has fully, you know, has, well, not fully developed, but has ovaries, you know, with eggs, with everything that is, you know, that is going to help her become, you know, the woman and the mother that, you know, she's meant to be, if that's meant for you in this lifetime. You know, that connection between the grandmother basically and the granddaughter has been there, not just mentally, emotionally, environmentally, from the physical presence, but that, like, Sophia was in my mother's womb already before, you know what I mean? Sophia, I even was in the world, and even before Sophia was even in the world. And so and my mother is an incredibly strong woman. She has a mental fortitude that I wish I could have. And so right now, as you were saying that, you know, it reminded me of that, and how important it is to, like you said, to not just think about the coming generations, but think about how can I, you know, also borrow from the people that have gone before me, from their sacrifices, from their victories, from, you know, that's part of who I am as well. And sometimes we have a responsibility as well, you know, to the ones that went before us, to succeed, to break through, you know, to expand, to engineer a new level of growth. that they're also counting on us, so that's beautiful, both ways, basically looking at it from the past and appreciation for it, and then using that to expand and create more inflows into the future. So I love that. I'm interested in hearing more about this in the coming months, Jonna, because I know we want to also, perhaps we give already a sneak preview as to, like, for the ladies inside of a coaching program. Jonna and I have been working together on having, or starting a monthly call that will basically cater to a lot of our coaching students, the ladies in the group, that may be interested in focused topics, relating wealth, relating money, relating mindset, leadership, scaling, and so I'm excited to announce it even here formally, and say that I'm excited about it. I'm looking forward to learning from you, a lot, and bringing also other women from within our existing community and outside of the community as guest experts to these monthly calls that will be there, supporting a lot of the ladies in the coaching group originally, and then hopefully we can expand and roll that out into the rest of the community.
Super excited.
Yes. So to wrap it all up, if anyone was listening to this and you had 3 pieces of advice for either someone that is looking at real estate, or land flipping, or starting something new, what would be those 3 pieces of advice that you would leave for someone? And that person can be either a person starting out, or maybe even a seasoned investor as well.
Sure. I don't think I can overemphasize how important daily goal setting has been for me. And I was listening to something recently. Joe Dispenza was saying, if you pick up your phone and you look at Facebook and email and all the things that you've done the day before, you physiologically become the same person that you were yesterday. But if instead you set intentionality and you set your goals, you on a cellular level become someone new. So I think that's been really inspiring to me, to think it's not just writing down a goal. It's not the habit of it so much as you are physically becoming someone new, and that anything's possible. And I think this was an entirely new world, as I shared. I didn't have any real estate experience. So coming with that curiosity of a child and knowing that there's going to be a ton of information that comes to you. I keep using this analogy of drinking from a fire hydrant. It's just like, so much information coming your way, but the consistency and keeping it going and not giving up at the beginning is something that I think has been really helpful, even when I felt like giving up, knowing that something beautiful was coming next. And something that was really helpful again last May was just to narrow down my options. So the singularity of focus. When I went all in land flipping, when I knew that it was the thing for me, that completely transformed my world. It just created this opening in the universe, and I was able to step through. And so creating that singularity of focus in whatever you're doing, I think, is really powerful.
I love how you mention it. I love that singular activity, that it's almost like the universe when it knows that this is a focus, it starts, synchronicities happen, and because all of that energy is going to that one thing versus you being disintegrated, in different things, and different, perhaps ventures that you don't really bring forward because you're so divided, in your time, in your effort, in your energy. And therefore what comes back is that same disintegration versus, that focus of everything being in a concerted, like I always think of it as like a wave, in that you throw into the universe, and that wave just like gets bigger, and you get to ride it, and the moment that wave breaks into other, swooshes and currents of water, then, it's, you're not riding it anymore. But if you stick to the one thing, it keeps on bringing more. And it's sometimes almost like hard to articulate and to, put language around it. But unless you experience it, it may be a foreign concept. And for a lot of entrepreneurs, it's hard because by nature, we are curious people. That's why we're entrepreneurs, because we love looking at opportunities and seizing opportunities. But there's so much to be said for finding that, that one thing. And then within that one thing, finding variety. Because I think that's what happens to a lot of people, is that they get bored because they're unable to find variety, because they don't want. Yeah, there's something to be said for the repetition, but once that repetition and that skill set, the next level of growth comes. And now there's variety, because now you are, leading a team, and you're going to be developing that team and training that team, and basically eventually have that team become, your self-managing, self-led team that is working your land flips, whether you're there or not, you know what I mean? And that's another level, and so on and so forth. So Jonna, it was such a pleasure having you today on Inflow. What a wonderful conversation. I feel like I could chat with you for hours.
Me too, but maybe in the future.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you so very much. And with that, I would love to, for anyone listening, just say that if you are at all interested in anything land flipping related, you can always join, one of our, master classes. You can go to landprofitmaster.com. We usually have those every 6 to 8 weeks. They're being hosted inside of a Facebook group. Thank you so much. If you enjoyed this episode or any of the other episodes, please make sure you leave me a review on iTunes or wherever it is that you listen to your podcast. Great reviews allow me to reach many more ladies out there that may be interested in all things land flipping, real estate, spirituality, faith, flow, and finances, pretty much. So thank you so much. And until the next one.
I hope this episode left you feeling inspired and ready to get inflows of cash, inflows of light, and inflows of faith in your life. I welcome your reviews on iTunes. Please leave me a review and help me create an amazing community of women in flow. Thank you, as always, for sharing your voice by going to michellebosch.com and joining the conversation about this show. And while you're there, grab a copy of my 10 Commandments to Living a Life in Flow. You can also follow me on Facebook at Michelle Bosch and on Instagram at Michelle Bosch Official. Thank you very much, and until the next one.